What if everything you think makes you, you, is just borrowed programming? What if the version of yourself you're defending so hard is actually the thing holding you back? I'm about to show you something most people never see about their own identity, and it might freak you out. What if your personality is just old survival code? Here's something wild. The person you think you are right now probably isn't who you actually are. It's who you had to become to survive your circumstances. And most people never realize they're still running that outdated survival program. Think about it. When you were a kid, you learned fast what got you approval and what got you rejected. Maybe being quiet kept you safe. Maybe being funny got you attention. Maybe perfectionism earned you love. So you built an entire personality around those strategies. And here's the thing, nobody tells you, those strategies worked back then. They kept you safe, kept you connected, kept you alive in whatever environment you were in. But now, they're killing your potential. That's because your brain doesn't distinguish between physical survival and emotional survival. It treats social rejection the same way it treats a physical threat. So every behavior pattern you developed to avoid pain gets hardwired as identity. You're not actually an introvert or bad with money or not a morning person. You're someone who learned specific responses to specific situations and then mistook those responses for truth. But only if you're really paying attention will you notice this. Every time you say, "just not good at that," or "that's not who I am," you're not describing reality. You're defending a limitation. You're protecting the cage. And your brain loves that cage because it's predictable. The devil you know feels safer than the angel you don't. So even when that cage is destroying your life, your nervous system will fight to keep you there. Research from Stanford actually backs this up. They found that people have what's called a self-schema, basically a mental framework of who they believe they are. And once that schema is set, your brain actively filters out information that contradicts it. So if you believe you're not successful, your brain will literally ignore evidence of your wins and magnify evidence of your failures. Not because you're broken, because that's how identity protection works. The most dangerous part, you think you're being authentic when you're really just being consistent with an outdated self-concept. You're loyal to a version of yourself that doesn't even serve you anymore. So here's what I need you to ask yourself. Which parts of your personality are actually yours? And which parts are just adaptive strategies you never question? How your identity keeps sabotaging your success. Let's talk about why you keep failing at the same things over and over. And no, it's not because you're lazy or undisciplined. It's way more psychological than that. Here's the mechanism. Every single action you take either reinforces or contradicts your identity. And when there's a contradiction, your brain freaks out. It's called cognitive dissonance, and your nervous system experiences it as actual pain. So let's say you see yourself as someone who struggles with money. That's your identity. Then you start making more money. Sounds good, right? Wrong. Your brain panics because now reality doesn't match your self-concept. What happens next is fascinating and devastating. You'll unconsciously sabotage. Maybe you'll make a terrible investment. Maybe you'll overspend. Maybe you'll just quit the job. Whatever it takes to get back to baseline, back to familiar. Because familiar feels like home, even when home is dysfunction. This is why people who win the lottery often end up broke. Why people who lose weight gain it back. Why people who escape toxic relationships find another toxic relationship. The external change happened, but the internal identity stayed the same. And here's the detail almost nobody catches. This isn't happening at a conscious level. You're not sitting there thinking, "let me ruin my life." It's happening in the background, in your automatic behaviors, in the small decisions you don't even notice making. Your identity is basically the operating system, and your behaviors are the apps. You can change the apps all you want, but if the OS is corrupted, the apps will keep crashing. That's why positive thinking doesn't work. Why affirmations feel fake. Why motivation fades. You're trying to override the system instead of upgrading it. But this is where it gets really interesting. Once you understand that identity is just a construct, something you built, not something you can rebuild it, you're not stuck with the factory settings. The problem is most people don't know how to rebuild identity without having a complete breakdown. They think change means destroying who they are, so they resist. They stay stuck. They call it staying true to myself. But staying true to a limited version of yourself isn't integrity. It's self-sabotage with good PR. So I'm asking you straight up, what would you do differently if you weren't trying so hard to stay consistent with who you used to be? How to redesign your identity without losing your mind. All right, you get it. Your current identity is the problem. But how do you actually change it without spiraling into an existential crisis? Here's the method. You don't try to become someone else overnight. That's a recipe for failure. Instead, you create what I call identity bridges, small, consistent actions that connect your current self to your future self. Think of it like this. You can't jump from one building to another. You need a bridge, and that bridge is built one action at a time. Start by picking one behavior that the future version of you would do automatically. Not something huge, something small, but symbolic. Like if you want to be someone disciplined, start with something stupid simple. Drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. Sounds pointless? It's not, because every time you do it, you're sending your brain evidence that you're someone who keeps promises to yourself. That evidence accumulates, and eventually, your identity shifts to match. But only if you catch this next part. You have to change the story you tell yourself about yourself. Most people are walking around with the terrible inner narrative. I'm so lazy. I always mess this up. I'm just not that kind of person. Stop that. Seriously. Language shapes identity more than you realize. Start narrating differently, not fake positivity, just factual. Instead of, I'm terrible at mornings, try learning to wake up earlier. Instead of, I always fail, try experimenting with what works. Small shift in language, massive shift in identity over time. And here's what almost nobody talks about. Your environment is constantly voting on who you are. If everyone around you sees you as the funny one, or the mess, or the smart one, you'll unconsciously play that role. You need to change your environment, or at least curate who you spend time with. Because you will become the average of the 5 people closest to you. That's not motivation talk. That's pattern recognition. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some relationships will not survive your evolution. And that's okay. Better to lose connections with people who need you to stay small than to lose yourself trying to stay comfortable. What's one identity bridge you could build starting today? Real talk. Drop a comment. What's the one thing the best version of you would do every single day? I want to know. And if this is landing, hit that like button. Let's keep going. How to lock in your new identity and make it permanent. You made it here. That already separates you from most people. Most quit when it gets real. But you're still here, which means you're serious about this. So let's lock it in. Your new identity needs 3 things to solidify: evidence, environment, and emotion. Evidence is simple. You need proof that you're actually changing. That comes from consistent action, not perfect action. Consistent action. Every time you do the thing, you're voting for the new identity. Stack enough votes, you win the election. Environment is non-negotiable. You cannot sustain a new identity in an old environment. If you're trying to be healthier, but your kitchen is full of junk food, you're fighting an uphill battle. If you're trying to be more focused, but your phone is blowing up every 5 seconds, good luck. Change the inputs, change the outputs. It's that simple and that hard. Emotion is the glue. Logic gets you started, but emotion makes it stick. You need to attach emotional weight to your new identity. Visualize it. Feel what it feels like to be that person. Not in a woo-woo way, in a neurological way. Your brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and real experience. So when you act as your new identity and emotionally reinforce it, you're literally rewiring your neural pathways. But here's the most critical thing. You're going to slip. You're going to have days where you revert to the old version. That's not failure. That's part of the process. The difference between people who transform and people who don't isn't that they never fall back. It's that they don't let one slip turn into a spiral. One bad day doesn't erase your progress, but the story you tell yourself about that bad day can. So stay aware of the narrative. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. This process isn't fast. It's not glamorous. There's no viral moment where everything clicks. It's just daily, boring, iterative commitment to becoming someone different. But here's what nobody tells you. That's exactly what makes it powerful. Because everyone's looking for the hack, the shortcut, the secret. And while they're searching, you're building. So the only question left is, are you actually going to do this? Or are you just going to think about it? Make this real. What's the first micro action you're committing to? Drop it in the comments. And if this video hit different, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Smash that like, subscribe if you want more of this kind of content, because we're just getting started. Evolution isn't a destination. It's a daily practice. See you in the next one.